My name is Mrs. Natalie Watson, and I'm 29 years old. I live in a small apartment with my husband. We've been married for 3 years and generally get along well. However, over the past few years, I've started feeling unhappy, not just with my husband but also with his parents. He has a close relationship with them, and we visit their house about once a week. At first, I thought it was nice how much he cared about his parents. But soon, every time I went to their house, they would ask, "Natalie, when are you going to quit your job? A woman's job is to take care of the home." Gradually, I started disliking these visits. I really enjoy my job and want to keep working as long as I can. I had already told my husband this before we got married. Yet, whenever his parents made these comments, he wouldn't say a word or even look at me, as if it didn't concern him. Eventually, I began dreading going to his parents' house. Sometimes, I would suggest to my husband, "Why don't you go alone?" But he'd always insist, "My parents want to see you too," and he'd make me go with him. Eventually, I stopped trying to argue. I didn't want to bring up how his parents' words bothered me, since it might hurt his feelings. So each time I just smiled and ignored their comments. What bothered me most, though, was when they'd ask, "Why don't you have a child yet?" I like kids and would love to have one, but it's not something that can happen instantly just because we want it. I didn't understand why they expected us to have a child just for their sake, and honestly, I wished they would leave me alone. I talked to my husband about it, but he just brushed it off, saying, "Don't worry about it. You're just overthinking." As my frustration built up because of his lack of support, my mother-in-law said something I couldn't ignore. She asked, "Are you infertile? Is that why you haven't had a child?" My father-in-law also looked at me like I'd done something wrong and asked, "Did you hide your infertility and marry our son?" I couldn't hold back any longer. I'd always managed to smile through their comments, but this time I finally replied, "I'll go through infertility treatment if that's what you want. But in return, can you promise never to bring this up again?" I was surprised at my own words, realizing how much stress I'd been holding in. Then, for the first time, my husband finally spoke up. My husband told his parents firmly, "I don't think we need fertility treatments. We're still young, and there's no need to rush. Fertility treatments are expensive, and I want us to enjoy our time as a couple." At the time, I took his words to mean that he was thinking about me and how I felt. One weekday, I took a day off work and went to see a gynecologist. Although my husband's parents had been nagging us less about having a child, I still wanted to know for sure if I had any fertility issues. I thought about discussing it with my husband, but he always got moody whenever I mentioned fertility treatments. So, I decided to go for the checkup on my own. The exam was faster than I expected, and I scheduled a follow-up appointment for the results the next week. As I was leaving, I made eye contact with a pregnant woman in the waiting room. I recognized her face immediately. It was Clara, my classmate from elementary and middle school. She recognized me, too, and came over to say hello. Clara was 9 months pregnant, and her belly was big. Since she'd just had her checkup, I decided to walk her home. I found out her house was close to mine, and I was even more surprised to learn that her husband worked at the same company as mine. As we caught up on our lives and shared memories, my eyes kept drifting to her belly. Noticing, Clara asked, "Do you want to touch it? Is it okay?" I asked, and she replied, "Of course." I gently touched her belly, remembering how slim and fit Clara used to be. Now her body was so different, and I was amazed by the thought of a baby growing inside her. As I held my hand there, I suddenly felt a slight movement. I looked up, surprised. "Did it just?" "Yeah," she said with a smile. "It started moving recently." "That's amazing." "Yeah," she agreed. As Clara happily stroked her belly, she looked like a true mother. Without thinking, I said, "I'm envious," but then I realized it might have sounded inappropriate, so I quickly looked away. Clara, being sensitive to emotions, noticed my reaction and asked, "Did I misunderstand something?" "I'm sorry, but did something happen?" I hesitated but knew I couldn't hide my feelings from Clara. So, I told her about my in-laws and their pressure about having children. Once I started talking, I couldn't stop. I ended up sharing everything, even about the fertility test I took that day. I worried I might have said too much, but the stress I had been feeling made it feel okay to share. I think I just needed someone to listen to my frustrations from the past few years. While I spoke, Clara just nodded and listened quietly. After I finished, she said, "You've been holding back for so long. You've handled it well." If it were me, I don't think I could have held back and would have cut ties with my in-laws. I nodded, realizing how stressed I had been. "I feel a bit relieved after talking to you, Clara. At least my husband stands by my side, which is a small comfort." I said this with a light laugh, but Clara looked tense. Confused by her expression, I called her name. After a moment of hesitation, she spoke up. "It's about your husband. You might want to keep the test results to yourself for now." I blinked, surprised by her words. "Why do you say that?" I asked her directly. Then Clara shared something shocking that I couldn't fully understand. I somehow made it home, feeling unsteady as I walked. Once home, I sat on the sofa, thinking about what Clara had said. I didn't want to believe it, but I also couldn't imagine her lying. I had been feeling uneasy about my husband's behavior lately. If what Clara said was true, I couldn't forgive him. I made up my mind to find out the truth. My husband and I were visiting my in-laws after a long time. While my husband and his parents were having tea and snacks, my mother-in-law suddenly asked, "So, when will you quit your job, Natalie?" Before, I would have said, "I don't have plans to quit yet," but this time I replied, "I suppose I'll quit when we have a child." My mother-in-law blinked and said, "Well, you've finally decided to have a child." My father-in-law excitedly added, "Oh, will I finally get to hold a grandchild?" But my husband, after glancing at me, made a face that said, "Don't say unnecessary things." He then said, "Having a child is a blessing, but we don't know if it will happen right away." As I expected, my husband reacted just like I thought he would. I glanced at my husband and said, "Actually, I went to the gynecologist the other day and got my infertility test results. It says there are no issues." Before he could respond, I continued, "I'm starting to want a child too. You'll cooperate for your parents' sake, right?" He looked between the test results and my face, then turned bright red and yelled, "I'm not taking any infertility treatments. I won't get tested either." His parents were shocked by his sudden outburst, and I felt disappointed because I realized Clara had been right. "Hey, do you know Mr. Howard?" I asked. He looked surprised and wondered how I knew. I decided to explain while waiting for his response. "His wife is my friend. Apparently, you've been saying things at work like, 'My wife is a defective product who can't have children because of infertility. She has abandoned being a woman and only focuses on work. I'm so pitiful to have married her.'" I looked at him with a cold stare, something I had never done before. His mouth trembled, and he got defensive. "So what if it's true? Who else would want someone like you?" Watching my furious husband, I felt my feelings for him starting to fade. I wondered what I ever saw in him. Calmly, I pointed to the test results on the table and said, "I just proved there's no problem with me, right?" He stayed silent, so I brought up something that had been bothering me. "Could it be that you're the one with issues? Is that why you've been refusing infertility treatments and testing?" At that moment, my mother-in-law, who had been quiet, spoke up. "There's no way that's true. If there's a problem, it's with you." Her face turned red as she grabbed the test results and tore them up. My husband seemed surprised by his mother's actions, but then agreed, "Yeah, that's right. There's no way I have a problem." They both started blaming me. Realizing that continuing the conversation was pointless, I slammed the prepared divorce papers on the table and said, "Then please divorce me. Why don't you find a much better wife than someone like me?" He replied, "Yeah, I'll find a much better wife than you," angrily, as he filled out the divorce papers. His parents didn't try to stop him. I emotionlessly watched them fill out the papers, feeling joy at the thought of severing ties with them. Once he finished, I quickly snatched the papers and said, "Well then, goodbye," as I hurried out of my in-laws' house. I thought I heard someone call out behind me, but I ignored it and headed straight to City Hall to submit the divorce papers. A few days later, I quickly moved out of the apartment we had shared and into my company dormitory. Since I was the only one on the lease and had already prepared for this day, the move went smoothly. I packed up my husband's belongings in cardboard boxes and sent them to his parents' house with cash on delivery. Once I got used to life in the company dormitory, I received a call from my ex-husband. I wondered what he wanted now, so I answered, but he yelled right away, "Why did you submit the divorce papers? Why don't you move out of the apartment?" I wanted to ask why he was bringing this up now. I calmly explained, "Don't say things that don't make sense. You agreed to the divorce and filled out the papers. I signed the lease for the apartment, so since we're divorced, I moved out. It's no longer necessary." But my ex-husband didn't listen. He kept insisting, "Take back the divorce. No, let's go submit new marriage papers. Where are you living now? Let's live together again." I couldn't take it anymore, so I said, "Okay, I'm hanging up now. Don't ever call me again." I tried to end the call, but he threatened, "If you don't tell me where you're living, I'll go to your company." I was fed up and told him, "You'll be the one in trouble if you cause any problems," and hung up. Still, I worried he might actually come to my company, so I talked to my boss about my ex-husband just in case. Neither my boss nor I thought he would actually do anything, but then he caused a scene. The security guard told me he went wild in the company lobby, and the police had to be called. I felt ashamed and guilty, but my coworker sympathized with me and said breaking up with him was the right choice. Later, I heard from Clara's husband that my ex-husband panicked when the police incident became known at his company and tried to make me the villain. However, Clara's husband corrected the story, and the lies my ex-husband told about me were exposed. It turned out he found it hard to stay at the company and ended up quitting. Most likely, my unemployed ex-husband was back at his parents' house, crying to them. Honestly, even though it might sound cruel, I thought it must be tough for his parents to support a son who was now both unemployed and divorced. But that didn't really matter to me anymore, since he was a stranger now. Since then, I've been free from unnecessary stress and focusing on work. I have more time and money to spend freely. I occasionally visit Clara to check on her, and we make plans to spoil her baby. She sometimes finds it amusing and shakes her head at me. As for getting remarried, I'm not thinking about that just yet. But I do hope that someday I can have a happy family of my own.